This day in sports history. This episode is brought to you by the Sterling Soap Company. I'm a big fan of shave soap. I've been using different brands for years, and I recently gave Sterling's shave soaps a try, and I've been very happy with the results. Sterling's shave soaps give you a great lather and a frictionless feel that allows the razor to glide right over the skin for a super close shave. No skin irritation and a clean, refreshing feel with no soapy residue after. I can tell you without a doubt, it's simply the best shave I've ever had. And my wife has noticed too. And here's the thing, with the ability to purchase 1-ounce sample pucks, you can try out different scents to find the right one for you. Give Sterling Soap a try today. Visit sterlingsoap.com. That's STIRLING soap.com. It's February 18th, and on this day in 2005, the mother of Major League pitcher Ugueth Urbina was rescued after being kidnapped and held for more than 5 months. Urbina's mom, Mara Villarreal, had been kidnapped from her home near Caracas, Venezuela on September 1, 2004. Urbina, who had pitched for Montreal, Boston, Texas, and had pitched for the Florida Marlins the season before when they had won the World Series, was with the Detroit Tigers at this point in his career. His high profile made his family members targets in his home country of Venezuela. Kidnappers soon demanded $6 million to release her. Urbina flew to Venezuela to work with local authorities in trying to get his mom released, but Urbina was told that it would be best if he did not offer to pay the ransom, and so he didn't. 5 months later, on this day in 2005, Venezuelan police stormed a camp in a remote mountain village in Bolivar and rescued his 54-year-old mother. Most of the kidnappers fled and were able to escape. One was shot and killed. Mara said she was not hurt or even treated poorly. She said the most hurtful thing was having to hear them saying that her son didn't love her because he didn't pay the ransom. 2005 was Urbina's last in the majors, starting the year with the Tigers and finishing his career in Philadelphia. He would run into trouble later in the year when he joined several men in an attack on workers at his family's ranch in Venezuela. He and the others wielded machetes and poured gasoline on the farm laborers there. He was sentenced to 14 years in prison for attempted murder, but was released in 2012 after serving just 7 years. On this day in 1979, it was the most important race in NASCAR's history. NASCAR's roots are in the South. It was a sport that grew out of moonshiners modifying their cars by increasing the horsepower of their motors and the stability of their suspensions to outrace police and government agents eager to shut down their illegal liquor businesses. Racing along narrow dirt roads in the foothills of North Carolina eventually led to some of those guys trying to find a way to legitimately run their souped-up cars on a racetrack. Well, starting in 1936, Bill France and several of his car-loving friends started racing their cars on the hard-packed sand of Daytona Beach. And that led to France starting NASCAR in 1947 and then building a racetrack in Daytona, which opened in 1959. Now here we are 20 years later, and NASCAR had grown considerably, but it was still known mostly as a Southern sport. Of the 39 races on the 1979 schedule, 23 were at Southern state racetracks, with only 2 of the other 8 held west of the Mississippi. On this day, CBS Sports set up their cameras to televise a stock car race to the nation live from start to finish for the first time. Now that was big enough in its own right, but something else that provided a big boost to viewership was the weather in the East. A huge snowstorm that started burying cities on Saturday and continued into this day snarled interstate travel east of the Mississippi. Businesses, restaurants, and movie theaters were closed. A lot of games scheduled for this day were postponed, and that left many with nothing to do but watch television. And with cable television in its infancy, most only had 4 channels to choose from. And so the television audience was much larger than if people in the East had had the opportunity to go outside. The innovation of putting cameras in cars so that people could see the action from the driver's perspective also started with this race, along with low-level camera angles to bring the racing action closer to the viewer. And then there was the ending.
Out of turn 2, Donnie Allison in first. Where will Cale make his move? He comes to the inside. Donnie Allison throws the block. Cale hits him. He slides. Donnie Allison slides. They hit again. They drive into the turn. They're hitting the wall. They're head on the wall. They slide down to the inside. Let's watch those third-place cars. They're out of it. Who is going to win it?
The third, fourth, and fifth place cars were nearly 30 seconds behind those two, but now they were racing for the win.
Here they come. Waltrip trying to slingshot. Petty is out in front at the line. Waltrip to the inside. Petty wins it.
So about a minute and a half had passed since Yarborough's and Allison's cars had come to rest on the grass between turns 3 and 4. That had given them enough time to climb out of their mangled cars and confront each other.
And there's a fight between Cale Yarborough and Donnie Allison. The tempers overflowing. They're angry. They know they have lost. And what a bitter defeat.
A couple of very hard men, very hardly upset. And Bobby Allison is stopped by his brother to help.
Donnie Allison said that he and Cale yelled at each other, and that would have been it if his brother Bobby hadn't shown up.
I stop where the crash scene is, and I say to Donnie, do you want to ride back to the garage area? You know, there was a crowd gathering, and, all those kind of things. And with that, Cale starts hollering at me, that I caused the wreck.
Several punches were thrown, and the two wrestled before being separated by safety crew members. And using the optics of today, a situation like that now would result in driver suspensions, fines, forced public apologies, editorials, and social media posts decrying the state of sports and humanity. But in 1979, there may not have been better publicity for racing. In fact, when Bill France was asked if he was going to penalize the drivers for their actions, he said, "Fine them, I should give them a bonus." And he was right. That night on every news and sports broadcast across the country, the brief fight between the Allisons and Cale Yarborough was shown again on television. It was great publicity for the sport, and NASCAR had millions of brand new fans. From one of NASCAR's best days to undoubtedly its worst, on this day in 2001, NASCAR President Mike Helton uttered these words, confirming NASCAR fans' worst fears.
After the accident in Turn 4 at the end of the Daytona 500, we've lost Dale Earnhardt.
On the final lap of the 2001 Daytona 500, Earnhardt was running third with his son Dale Jr. in front of him in second and Michael Waltrip leading. Contact with the number 36 car of Kenny Schrader caused him to spin and crash head-on with the outside wall. His death was announced to a stunned country by Helton a few hours later. It was a dark day in the history of the sport. But as horrible a tragedy as that was, it was not in vain. Now, several key safety innovations were implemented quickly because of it, including head and neck restraint systems, or HANS devices, along with softer energy-absorbing walls installed at all tracks, and carbon fiber seats were mandated, providing more driver protection. Those changes have made a significant difference. In the 11 years prior to Earnhardt's death, there had been 9 driver deaths in NASCAR events. Since that day in 2001, no NASCAR driver has been killed as a result of a crash during a race. Hey, I needed to call a quick timeout to let you know that we're giving away a $50 gift card to Homefield Apparel. Have a favorite college sports team? Of course you do. You're listening to a sports podcast. Well, Homefield Apparel has all the great gear so you can support your team in style. Jerseys, hoodies, hats, and a whole lot more are available in your team's colors and insignias. So, go to sportshistorynetwork.com/giveaways for your chance at a $50 gift card to Homefield Apparel. I've also put a link in the show notes. Now, let's get back out there. We've got more of this episode to do. On this day in 1944, the Cincinnati Reds signed 15-year-old Joe Nuxhall to a contract. He would make his major league debut later on that year to become the youngest player ever in the major leagues. The signing of Nuxhall was due in part to World War II, which took a number of players away from the big leagues to go fight in the war. Now, interesting fact, the Reds scouts who found Joe were actually initially interested in his 36-year-old father. But his dad's job at a diesel locomotive factory was more stable than taking a chance on pitching in the majors, and so he passed on the opportunity, allowing Joe to get his shot. Nuxhall's debut later that year as a 15-year-old still makes him the youngest player to play in the major leagues. And on this day in 2008, a freak accident that could have turned out much worse provided some comic relief the next day. Hunter Pence was gearing up for his second year with the Houston Astros and was at spring training in Kissimmee, Florida. He was renting a little bungalow that happened to have a hot tub on a backyard patio. Pence, in describing what happened, said he was getting ready to join a friend in the hot tub, and he went outside, but before climbing in, decided he needed to go to the bathroom first, so he headed back inside, intentionally leaving the sliding glass door to the patio open. Well, his friend must have had a dad who always asked, "Were you raised in a barn?" anytime a door was left open, and so he closed it. Pence, still figuring the door to be open, and with it being a piece of glass, thought it was still open, and he jumped through it, and the glass shattered into thousands of pieces, cutting Pence mostly on his legs. He called 911, who rushed a fire truck, ambulance, and police car to the apartment. He got bandaged up and then a trip to the hospital for some stitches. Pence could laugh about it with his Astros teammates the next day, saying, "It's pretty silly to have this kind of freak accident happen." He missed about a week of workouts, but he healed pretty quickly and went on to play 157 games for the Stros that year, and then went on to have a nice career, playing 14 seasons before retiring in 2020. And time now for today's That's Got Nothing to Do with Sports fun fact. It's understandable if you thought that two-cushion love seat was meant to snuggle up with your honey bunny. But the original reason a love seat had two cushions was meant to be for a young lady and her dress. In 1700s Europe, hoop skirts came into fashion, and so an extra spot was made to accommodate these new, larger fashion must-haves. When fashion trends began to shrink the dress in the 1800s, these two-seaters became a nice place for that gentleman suitor to sit for polite conversation. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.